Much for joining us today. We're going to get started in a few minutes while we let more people join. Looks like we're starting to get more folks streaming in. Yeah, we can't wait. Hi, everybody. So we're going to allow a couple more minutes for more folks to join. We like just to make sure as many folks can join. So a couple more minutes. Thank you so much.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Soha, and I am the application scientist at RealSense. Today's webinar topic, good versus bad data, was inspired by many of our end users who often ask, how do I decipher bad data from the good? How do I work with all of the data I get? Where do I start? Don't worry, as you are not alone. In our 30 minutes of time together, we will discuss what makes data good or bad and go over simple steps you can take to improve the quality of your results.
And by the way, I'm a Christian. For those not familiar, I'm Sohaila's colleague, also application scientist. Sorry, Soha.
Thank you, Christian. We will include best practices like proper sample preparation, correct sample loading, and effective chip cleaning to ensure accurate measurements every time. We will also briefly introduce Clarity, which is our data analysis software. Okay, before we begin, I wanted to introduce our latest product, formally released on Valentine's Day, MicroVisc Pro, our called Classic MicroVisc, which was originally introduced in 2009, has needed a revamp for a long time. While our beloved MicroVisc will still be available, we know that you will love MicroVisc Pro just as much as we do, featuring small samples as little as 100 microliters and with disposable syringes, the MicroVisc Pro now features built-in temperature control that is light speeds farther than MicroVisc's original temperature control. Still so easy to use, a 7-year-old can use it. MicroVisc Pro can also still be portable with a portable battery configuration option. As you can also see, the instrument features a new touch screen with a very nice user interface design and with the highly repeatable and accurate measurements. MicroVisc Pro is not just suitable for R&D environments, but QC departments, hospitals, and GMP lab settings with 2021 CFR Part 11 software. MicroVisc Pro, as well as all of our viscometers, are powered by VROC technology. VROC stands for Viscometer Rheometer on a Chip. US Pharmacopoeia confirms this technology is similar to USP Chapter 911, but formally under equivalent Chapter 914. VROC technology is also referenced as the rectangular slit method. The key benefit of the VROC is that the chips enable small sample viscosity measurements with a wide dynamic range when it comes to measurement parameters, but ultimately is one of the few methods on the market that provide first principle viscosity measurements. Why is this important? First principle measurements removes any impurities of assumptions from your measurements. You are also getting the direct answer or direct solution and not indirect results. Just from utilizing VROC technology, you are already on the right step to get good data. VROC technology is basically a combination of microfluidics and MEMS pressure sensors. So we have a rectangular microfluidic channel where we have 4 pressure sensors which are linearly aligned across the channel. We precisely control the flow rate through the channel and monitor pressure drop across the channel. Since we have a well-defined geometry, we can calculate shear rate from the flow rate and the dimensions of the channel. And shear stress is calculated from the pressure drop and geometry of the channel. And shear stress divided by shear rate gives you viscosity. So this is how we calculate viscosity. So we can control shear rate, measure shear stress, and calculate viscosity very precisely. So I'm going to start with the basics. If you want good data or even bad data in rare cases, it all starts with proper sample preparation. When we are busy, it's easy to rush or skip steps in preparing our samples. This is where you can really make a difference before you even start running your experiments. Proper sample preparation gives you control over the quality of your results. Small details can dramatically improve your data quality, and they are easy to implement. Always make sure your samples are mixed thoroughly. We hear that samples are well mixed, but when we analyze them here in-house, we often find they are not. That's why we recommend using a gentle mixer or mix samples overnight for a truly homogeneous solution. Because turbidity and uneven mixtures lead to inaccurate data. So it's best to get it right the first time. Let's now take a look at the solubility of BGG, bovine gamma globulin, and BSA, bovine serum albumin, as model proteins in different solvents. So these are some examples of showing sample preparation. So now the question is DI water a good solvent for BGG? The short answer is no. If we look at the image of BGG in DI water, we can see clearly a clear turbidity in the sample. However, BGG is much more soluble in sodium chloride and PBS buffer. On the other hand, BSA is completely soluble in DI water. To explain this, we can refer to the isoelectric point of BGG and BSA. The isoelectric point is the pH at which a protein has no net electrical charge. At this specific pH, the positive and negative charges on the protein are balanced, which results in an overall neutral charge. When the pH is below this point, the protein tends to have a positive charge, while a pH above the isoelectric point results in a negative charge on the protein. When the pH is close to a protein's isoelectric point, its solubility is often significantly reduced. Now we understand why BGG is not soluble in DI water. The pH of DI water is around 7, which is very close to the isoelectric point of BGG, which is 6.6. This is why BGG does not dissolve well in DI water. On the other hand, the isoelectric point of BSA is 4.5, which is far from the pH of DI water. That explains why BSA is fully soluble in DI water. Keep this in mind when preparing your samples. This principle also applies when choosing the right cleaning solvent, which we will discuss later. Now let's go over how to properly prepare and load your sample into vials or a 96 well plate in Initium, and also 100 microliter syringe in Enviroc-2 instrument. To help ensure your success, every purchase of the Virac Initium 1 Plus, our automated viscometer, includes a centrifuge. This is a valuable tool for removing bubbles from your vials. If you are using the Initium, we highly recommend using the centrifuge to eliminate any air gaps or bubbles in the vial. Similarly, if you are working with a 96 well plate, there is a plate centrifuge available to help remove any bubbles from the wells. For both the Enviroc-2 and Initium 1 Plus, we also provide a positive displacement pipette. This pipette is essential for proper sample loading, as we have found that other pipettes often cause issues. We strongly recommend using the pipette that comes with the system for getting optimal results. When working with the Enviroc-2 100 microliter syringe, we recommend using the positive displacement pipette to backload the sample into the syringe for accurate loading. Additionally, lab benches often have wipes that claim to be lint-free, but they can still generate fibers. We recommend using true lint-free or clean room grade wipes because a standard lab wipe can introduce fibers into the syringe, vials, or pipettes, which can negatively impact your measurements. Finally, just as you want to avoid fibers, it's important to prevent dust from interfering with your measurements. Using a compressed air can or a clean air source can help ensure that dust doesn't contaminate your setup. Let's now cover some essential instrument preparation tips before you begin your measurements. We have 3 viscometers available: the fully automated Initium 1 Plus, the semi-automated Enviroc-2, and the portable MicroVisc Pro. When using any of these instruments, especially for measurements at temperatures below 18 degrees C, it's important to use a dry air supply. This can be easily connected to the instrument to prevent condensation. Without this, condensation can negatively impact the electronic components of the chip. You can also monitor the use counts of various instrument parts. For example, on the initium, you can check the use count for the auto sampler syringe, test syringe, switch valves, and other components. This allows you to stay on top of maintenance and ensure that everything is like functioning properly. Another key tip for accurate measurement is to always use the latest software and firmware. We continuously release updates that include bug fixes and performance improvements. So it's important to stay up to date because you don't want to miss out on these improvements as they ensure the best possible performance of your instrument. Before starting any measurement, be sure to run diagnostics, including the chip test, flow test, leak test. The chip test, for example, checks the health of the pressure sensors, which is critical for accurate data. The flow test verifies the integrity of the fluidic and air path and can track the health of the system over time. If there is any clog or sample residue in the chip, the flow test will fail, alerting you that the chip may need cleaning, additional cleaning, or even in some cases, it may need replacement. Finally, the leak test identifies any potential leaks in the system. So a helpful feature of the Initium and Enviroc2 software is that if the leak test fails, it provides step-by-step troubleshooting instructions that helps you resolve the issue quickly by yourself. Okay, so we always emphasize the importance of proper cleaning for ensuring the accuracy and quality of your data. One of the key factors is choosing a primary solvent that is compatible with your sample. We typically use 3 solvents for cleaning the system, the chip, but the primary solvent should always be fully compatible with your sample. To test compatibility, you can do a simple test on a dummy chip or in a glass vial. After adding the solvent to your sample, the solution should be clear and homogeneous without any precipitation. If the solvent causes phase separation or results in a turbid solution with precipitates, it's not a good solvent for your sample and you shouldn't proceed with cleaning. For protein samples, a good primary solvent is the formulation buffer. So we recently improved our cleaning procedure, and now we use the formulation buffer with 1% aqueous. My colleague, Dr. Ochoa, will go over the specifics of cleaning biologics in a few minutes.
That's me.
Okay, so another essential cleaning process for protein samples is enzymatic cleaning, which is often necessary when there is a buildup of sample in the microfluidic channel. For enzymatic cleaning, we use Zymet Pro undiluted one, which is introduced directly into the microfluidic channel. So you can run Zymet as a sample on Initium or Enviroc2 or even MacroVisc. This cleaning procedure is performed at a temperature of 50 degrees Celsius. The cleaning process typically involves soaking the chip for 1 to 2 hours, allowing the sample to dissolve completely and effectively clean the chip. As shown in the image here in this slide, you can clearly see the chip before and after Zymet cleaning. The difference is evident with the Zymet solution successfully removing protein residue from the chip. This process significantly enhances the quality and accuracy of the data you can obtain. Okay, now I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Ochoa, and he's gonna go over some details about chip maintenance and start sharing some good and bad data with you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's very nice learning about how, how to do these best practices with cleaning and the other points you mentioned. So I'd like to go back a little bit to the first slide that my colleague was presenting, because when you were mentioning this, it was very exciting for me. So this is the new Microvisc Pro. So it's the next generation Microvisc device. And this is very exciting because it has a lot more features than the previous one. So as my colleague mentioned, it has a touchscreen display with a built-in software. So you don't have to connect any computer to it. So it's a very nice display. It kind of reminds me of an iPhone screen. It's it makes it very fast and to manually measure sample after sample. So actually just yesterday, my colleague measured about 100 samples with this unit alone. So another thing my colleague mentioned was the temperature control, the Peltier control. So because of this, there's no longer any need to put this unit in a box or to connect it to a thermocube. Another nice thing is that the data can be exported quickly to Excel just using a USB drive. You connect to the side, go to the data, tap to export, and that's it. So there's many other new features, and we'll save those for the next webinar where we'll cover more of these features. So continuing with the presentation. So my colleague Sohila was explaining about the best practices for cleaning your samples. So I'd like to go over what happens when you use a bad cleaning solvent. So here we show an example of what happened when one of our customers was using a bad primary solvent. So in this case, they were running protein samples, and their primary solvent, so this is the solvent that was used to directly displace their solution from the chip. This primary solvent was a buffer that was not a good solvent for their map proteins. So what happened with their instrument and their data? So this is what happened. We can see that the repeatability between segments is bad. So these are viscosity measurements here. We can also see the repeatability between the runs is bad as well. So this is a viscosity for one run. This is for the next. So we can see that it's not as high as it should be otherwise. And also you can see the quality of the viscosity versus time plots is not great. So they're showing this dip in this region, but this region should be relatively flat. So for those folks who are only listening to us, this is the region where the viscosity is reaching its steady state value. But for these folks, they were seeing this dip in viscosity. So once we switched these folks over to a good cleaning solvent, they didn't develop this issue anymore. So that leads us to the next slide, where we show what we typically recommend for the cleaning solvent for biologic samples, which are very common for our customers to work with. So cleaning in between samples is not always required when you're using an instrument like the Microvisc or the Microvisc Pro, but with our Microvisc Pro new instruments, you can run one sample after the next without cleaning, provided the samples are compatible with each other. So after you finish measuring all these samples, then you can clean with a buffer or an aqueous solution. But for MVROC2 and Initium instruments, for these, we need to clean and dry the channel in between samples because we're relying on this retrieval and recovery functions that these instruments have. So for cleaning of biologics on MVROC2 or Initium, we have a series of solvents that will allow us to clean the chip very well and dry it out relatively quickly. So the primary solvent will be your formulation buffer, and we mix this with 1% aqueous So that my colleague was mentioning this earlier. And then the next slide, where I can show you exactly how this primary solvent is prepared for those not familiar. So in the past, this primary solvent used to be only the formulation buffer itself, but we found that cleaning improved when we made this a combination of the buffer and aqua. The secondary solvent displaces the primary solvent. So because of this should be compatible with the primary. And for biologics, we use DI water. Before, we used to recommend dilute aqua here, but now we put that aqua here in the primary instead, and we recommend using water for the secondary. So this improves the cleaning because this DI water now is more compatible with the next solvent, which is acetone, the enhancer. So this solvent displaces the water, and it's volatile, so it helps with making the channel dry quickly. So for Initium 1+ and Enviroc 2, we use acetone, while for the old Initium Model 1, it's IPA. So for the 1+ and Enviroc 2, we highly recommend you stick with acetone because it dries much faster than IPA. And this ensures that your flow pads are completely dry before the next sample is introduced into the channel. So let's go to the next slide. So here, we show how you prepare, you can prepare the primary cleaning solvent for your biologics. So it's very simple. Most of you will find it trivial. So you prepare a solution of your buffer first for your MABs, proteins, or other biologics. So it's important to ensure that this buffer is a good solvent for your samples. And what I've noticed is that 1X PBS works very well for many of our customers, though we recommend that you ensure your buffer is a good solvent. So now when we have that buffer prepared, we simply add about 2.6 grams for every 500 grams of buffer. And this is 2.6 grams of concentrated aqua from the pouch. So you stir up this mixture until it's well mixed, and that's it. So this will give you a primary solvent that consists of your formulation buffer with 1% aqua. And now you're ready to use this for cleaning. So on your Initium and Enviroc 2, this is going to be your primary solvent, while for the MicroVis Pro, this will be the solvent that you use for cleaning. You pretty much introduce this into the channel to clean your solution. So another best practice is that you ensure that you're not getting fibers into your channel. So here are images of 2 chips showing fibers in the inlet that have clogged the chips. So these fibers will give you bad data, as I'm going to show you in a later slide. And the best ways to ensure this, that this doesn't occur, is that twofold. So one is that you use a compressed air source to remove any particles and dust. And 2 is to use lint-free wipes. We do not use chem wipes. These are not, should not be used with these microfluidic devices. So for our Initium instruments, we recommend you remove any dust from the vials or the 96-volt plate with this compressed air. For the Enviroc 2, you can use this air to blow out any particles off the test syringe before loading your sample. And if you need to wipe something from the instrument, that's when we recommend you use the lint-free wipes. So whenever I visit customer sites, I often see chem wipes near the instruments. So I always make sure to inform our customers not to use these chem wipes. So here we show another way that you can get fibers into the chip, which is not good. So this is an Enviroc 2 chip, and with this chip you may be tempted to clean the inlet of the chip, but you shouldn't be doing this. This is because using any type of swabs or wipes to clean the chip inlet can introduce fibers into the chip or the flow channel. So what we do here at RioSense instead is to simply allow the solvent to dry, So the advice is similar to, not using Q-tips on your ears. That's how I think of it. So another quick advice is to not put any liquid drops into the ports as well. You may be tempted to do that, but you shouldn't do that. So one time I actually sprayed solvent into an inlet and ended up destroying the sensors. So that's another good practice to follow, not to spray any liquid into the ports there. So simply allowing the chip cleaning station to clean your chip is a good practice to follow. So what happens when you have fibers in your channel? So this is the data we took from a chip that we confirmed had fibers in it. So the data we took was not good. We can see here in the table the R-squared values are low, and the repeatability between viscosity measurements is low. So you can see here how the viscosity repeats for each temperature are not consistent, and the quality of the viscosity versus time plots was affected as well. So this is the viscosity versus time plot you see in the software for these instruments. So these are signs you can use to determine if your chip has any fibers in the channel. So you may be asking, how do I check the accuracy of my data? So how do I ensure that the data I'm getting is not just repeatable, but it's universally accepted? So a great way to do this is to run standards to ensure your chip is calibrated and in good condition. So popular standards are medical grade viscosity standard, or MGVS. So we use that commonly for Initium and MVROC2. For the Microvisc or Microvisc Pro, it's more common to use oil standards. So in using these standards, we calibrate the chip to within 2% of the standard certificate of analysis value. So another way to check for accuracy is to ensure that the R-squared value of your data is high enough. So anything over 0.996 is good. Over 0.999 is ideal. So another way you can check if your chip is in good condition is to run diagnostics like the leak, flow, and chip tests, which are available with the MVROC2 and Initium. So if you run the chip test, you can check if the chip is in good condition. With the flow test, you can check if there's enough flow through the channel. And with the leak test for MVROC2 and Initium, you can check if there's no leak in the system. So why do we check for leaks on the MVROC2 and Initium, but not for our other instruments? And the reason we do that is because for these instruments, the Initium and MVROC2, we have this powerful feature called sample retrieval and recovery. So this retrieval and recovery require a closed system. And this is because this feature allows these instruments to perform unlimited measurements with small volumes and to recover the samples as well. So like for recovering your sample, if you want to use it for another diagnostic test like DLS or SEC or whatever other technique you want to use. So let's go back to accuracy. Another way you can check that is to ensure that for each measurement, your percent full scale pressure is greater than about 5 to 10%. And this percent full scale pressure is basically how much the chip is pressured as a percentage of the max pressure it can tolerate. So if the percent is too low, that means that there's too much noise to signal in the chip. So we want this percentage to be generally above 5 to 10%. So let's say you followed the good practices, and by doing this, you'll be happy because you'll be getting good data. And here we show an example of good data that we got with the Initium 1 Plus. So we can see that the R-squared values are good. The viscosity is repeatable between segments. It's repeatable between different runs. And the quality of the viscosity versus time plot is excellent. So Of course, one reason we got great data is because we used this good cleaning solvent order that we show here. So this is an example of good data that you can get very accustomed to obtaining with these these good practices that we're showing. So we've been talking a lot about cleaning and how it's important for microfluidics. But for this final slide here, we want to show what happens when you don't prepare the sample well, or when your sample is undergoing liquid-liquid phase separation. So by not prepared well, what I mean is that the solvent is not adequately dissolving your protein. So what happens is that you can see some or all of these issues we show here. So one of these is that the R squared is bad. Also, your viscosity is not repeatable, cannot be repeatable between segments or runs. Another thing you may see is the quality of the viscosity versus time plots is not good. So these are some examples here. Now, to overcome these issues, you have to make sure your sample is stable and make sure that it's stable at multiple temperatures as well. So we've seen cases where there's liquid-liquid phase separation at lower temperatures. So we start measuring the data, and the data is good at higher temperatures, but once the temperature is lowered for that same sample, the R squared starts getting bad. And we see these other characteristics of bad data. So that's our advice on these some of the most important best practices when using our instruments, as well as examples of bad data you can get when these practices are not followed. So we hope this was informative to you. Once you follow these practices, I would say the sky's the limit when it comes to getting a lot of good data very quickly. So before we open the floor to any more questions, I'd like to inform you on our upcoming end user forum. So this user forum is the first we've hosted in a couple of years at least. We have already over 30 folks from a variety of different fields attending. And here you're gonna get the chance to get hands-on with the instruments. There will be instrument demos as well, presentations from industry folks. We have a rheologist speaker from Kraft Heinz. His name is Sham Shear. We have another speaker. He's the CEO of Stratum Medical in San Diego. His name is Jorg Schaap. And there's a third speaker as well. I don't recall the name at the moment. So there's also going to be a happy hour session. Breakfast and lunches are included. And also the area around there is very beautiful, as you can already start seeing from the image here. So we wanted to mention this as the last thing for today. But yeah, we'll take any questions now if you have any. Let's take a look at the questions here. So looks like we have a few now. That's great. So one of the questions is, I think you can filter out the good and bad data automatically through the analysis tool Clarity. Is that true? That's true. We have the RioSense Clarity Analysis software. And with this, you can import data from your instrument and filter it using R squared criteria, or it's also very customizable. You can reprocess it using other filters that you can add or remove. So yeah, it's a very nice software for filtering your data, and it also has other analysis features as well, like modeling of your results, like Ross-Minton, even viscosity versus shear rate modeling, and injectability force analysis, intrinsic viscosity analysis. It has other features as well. This is another question. Shear thickening always freaks me out. How do I know when shear thickening is real? So shear thickening, what we typically see is shear thinning samples here. I haven't really encountered any shear thickening, and that's the reason for that is because of the samples that I'm been working with. I know that there's samples like some particle suspensions that exhibit this shear thickening behavior for higher rates, and they typically, some of these can exhibit this behavior where you see this viscosity not varying too much with shear rates, and then at a certain shear rate, it starts jumping up in viscosity. So to answer this question is, you should remember what is the material you're working with. Is it known to exhibit such behavior? If it's a material that's not expected to see such behavior, and you're seeing this shear thickening occurring, it could be due to another reason. Maybe you're not, the sample is, the properties are, it's not stable, or
Actually, yeah.
best practice is not followed.
Shear thickening, actually, as you said, is not very common. So what we see here, what we test, for example, for protein and MAP sample, they show shear thinning behavior. So if you see shear thickening in your MAP sample, that's like that's something strange, and it needs to be you need to actually figure out why you are seeing shear thickening in your protein sample. It's not as far as we know, to the best of our knowledge, it's not possible for any protein or MAP samples. If you're talking about extensional chips, so sometimes when we run some low viscosity samples on extensional chips, we may see some shear thickening behavior, which is not real. That shear thickening is also artificial because of the secondary flow in the channel in the chips. We can see some artificial shear thickening, which is not real. So if you are using other instruments and you have seen this shear thickening, then I think it's time to question that instrument, because I'm assuming that you are working with protein sample, because you shouldn't see shear thickening in protein sample.
Yeah, I was at a customer site and they mentioned that their protein exhibited shear thickening. So that was surprising. And we measured that same sample that they were getting shear thickening with a different microfluidic device, but we actually saw shear thinning. And what we think is going on is that with the other microfluidic device they're using, the shear thickening that it's giving them is an artifact due to the different, the change in width between one region to the next in that device. They're getting data that looks like a shear thickening, but it's not due to the nature of the sample. That's due to the limitation of that device. So it's interesting. If you could tell us more about your sample, we can help you with that. So I'd like to continue on. I have a couple more questions. Thank you for the presentation. Is it possible to clean the old MVROC with acetone as well? Yes.
Yes.
Very possible. Answer is yes. Next question is, when there are bubbles in the samples, will it damage the VROC chip? Answer is no, it will not damage the chip. And then another question is, we have the MVROC2 viscometer, and the current primary cleaning solution is 1% aquat and not PBS with 1% aquat. So can that affect the B05 chip?
So actually, MVROC2 CCS, we have some pre-programmed or default protocols for like buffer cleaning protocol, soap cleaning protocol, and oil cleaning protocol. So I need to know your sample. What samples are you trying to run on MVROC2? For example, if you are running protein or MAP sample, you can use buffer cleaning. And for the primary, the solvent should be your formulation buffer or like PBS plus 1% aquat. The secondary solvent is DI water, and the enhancer is acetone. So if you are dealing with protein sample, yeah, on the screen of the CCS, when you, for example, when you choose buffer cleaning, it says first the primary is buffer, secondary DI water, and enhancer acetone. Or if you, for example, choose soap cleaning, primary is aqueous, secondary is DI water, I think, and enhancer is acetone. So it depends on the sample you are running. But if you are testing protein sample, we highly recommend using PBS and 1% aqueous as the primary.
Sorry to interrupt. They mentioned they're using, it's a protein map.
Yeah, protein map, as I said, for the primary, please use PBS or your formulation buffer with 1% aqueous. As we discussed in this webinar, you can easily make this solution and use it as the primary. For the secondary, please use DI water, and enhancer should be acetone.
Thank you so much. So this is related to the shear thickening question. So the same person mentions, is it slightly shear thickening or slightly shear thinning? What's the percent threshold for you to confirm that the sample is truly shear thinning or thickening? So threshold that we use is 5%.
5 to 10%.
5 to 10%. So if it drops more than that, it's it could be due to the shear thinning or thickening. If it's less than that, it's
can be because
it cannot be really inferred.
Yeah, it can be because of chip bias, or if you are using 2 chips, it can be offset between the chips. So we typically consider 10% as the difference threshold.
So another question is, I use the MVROC1 viscometer upon increasing the temperature during the experiment. I end up noticing small bubbles forming in the syringe, gas expanding at high temperature. Before loading my syringe at the lower temperature, I do ensure that I remove the bubbles. Would the solution to this problem be loading fresh sample at each temperature, or is it possible to use a positive displacement pipette like you mentioned here? So a good way to ensure that your bubble is not expanding as much in high temperature is to ensure that your sample is as free of bubbles as possible. Now, I have a question. What temperatures are you running for your for this sample? If you could mention it here, that would be helpful.
But yeah, if you from the beginning, if you load the syringe like very well without any bubble, so there is very it's unlikely to get bubble at higher temperatures. So please make sure even a tiny bubble, if you load in the syringe at a low temperature, it can get bigger at higher temperature. So, but still, it depends on the temperature. I think you are using like HTS maybe that goes up to 100 something. So if you give us more information about the temperature you are running your sample at, that would be very helpful.
That would help us more because sometimes the temperature can be it can range. The range is very large, and it'll help us more to identify the exact temperature you're using. So another question is, what is a good cleaning cycle for our E05 chip if my sample's viscosity is around 600 to 800 CP? So let me, this is, which instrument is this? This would be the MVROC2 viscometer.
600, 800?
A 600 to 800 CP E05 chip.
And protein sample?
And this is a protein, MAP protein.
So you can use high viscosity mode on CCS. So we have 3 levels: low viscosity, medium viscosity, and high viscosity. For your sample, I recommend using high viscosity. And yeah, as I said, use buffer aqueous as the primary, DI water as the secondary, and acetone as enhancer. Also, since you are dealing with very high viscosity protein and MAP sample, I highly recommend running zymet or enzymatic cleaning after like 1 or 2 sample testing, because this high viscosity proteins can leave residue inside the chip, protein deposit. I mean, so it needs to be removed from the chip, and the only way that you can remove the protein deposit from the chip is running Zymet or enzymatic cleaning. So please make sure to run this cleaning mode in between your samples, maybe after, because these samples are very high viscosity. I recommend after 2 samples, run 1 Zymet cleaning. Enviroc2 software also has the preloaded Zymet cleaning protocol for each chip type. So you can use that, and you can load undiluted Zymet Pro into the test syringe, 100 microliter test syringe, and just mount the setup on the Enviroc2, just like you run your sample, and choose the Zymet cleaning measurement protocol, and after 1-2 hours, your chip should be fully cleaned, and there shouldn't be any protein deposit inside the chip. But if you have further question regarding this, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can help you with this.
So with this, I'm looking at this question with the bubble for the Enviroc1 viscometer, and they do ensure that they're removing the bubbles. They're asking if the solution is to load fresh sample at each temperature or use a positive displacement pipette. So yeah, you can use a positive displacement pipette if your sample is very high viscosity. If you have a small bubble that forms at a higher temperature on your Enviroc1, you may still be able to get good results with pumping the sample to the chip, because the bubble will remain in the test syringe. So I wanted to give a little more answers to that question. So another question is, how do you recommend playing around with priming, because sometimes my samples take longer to prime, so I'm scared of getting priming data or unstable data in my data set, which will impact my reports. So one of the things I recommend to end users is to, when they look at their Excel report, they can use criteria to not use, filter out some of the data segments. So one thing I recommend is not to use the priming segment data, because the purpose of the priming segment is to introduce a sample into your channel to make sure it's fully wetted and the system knows that the chip is loaded with sample, and it knows how to handle your sample, like if you use automatic mode measurements. So you can disregard any priming segment results from your final report. And of course, you can use the other criteria here as well to look at your data, make sure that the R-squared is high enough, make sure it's over a certain threshold, make sure the percent full scale is above 5%. And yeah, those are the most common criteria you can use to filter out results from your report. We have a comment here. Thank you so much for that. So the comment is, I use electrolytes.
Oh.
So this is related to the question we got with the bubbles. Yeah. So the bubbles in the Enviroc1 syringe forming at higher temperatures. So the user uses electrolytes and ionic liquids, and these are between 25 to 60 degrees. So yeah, we've seen, I've measured samples, I place samples where we ramp it up to 70 on this old Enviroc device. And you can, if you have a small bubble there, it can be amplified at these higher temperatures based on what you mentioned, because you have, the gas is expanding. But what we've seen is that you can still get good measurements despite the bubble being there. Now, if the bubble goes into the channel, then you can have a segment, that segment that can have lower quality results. But provided that your bubble remains in the test syringe, you should still get good results. But let us know if you do get end up getting undesirable results, and we can work with you to improve this.
One thing, I don't know, one quick test that you can do with this sample is that, for example, you can load sample into the test range with a bubble. You can intentionally introduce a bubble and then place this syringe in somewhere in oven or somewhere that you can increase the temperature to 60 and see if the bubble size changes with temperature. So if that's the case, then that means maybe at elevated temperature your sample is tends to create or form bubbles, or even the existing bubble can get bigger, at elevated temperature. So it might be because of the nature of your sample. So I don't have experience with ionic liquids, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, we don't have as much experience with these liquids, but we do have, I think we have an application note or two on ionic liquids measured by previous colleagues. So we can check our database if you want and send that over to you. So we'll give maybe 1 more minute for any other questions, and then this would be a good time to, afterwards it would be a good time to wrap it up before the hour. So another question is, will you be going over more details on this during the end user forum? Absolutely. So we can go over this. Any questions you have, we'll be there. We'll be there to answer them. And we'll go over the best practices during the forum as well. We'll be giving the instrument demos too. So in-person instrument demos. Yeah, there's a lot of chance for interaction and learning more about the instruments and how this can help you with your applications and what you're trying to accomplish with your work. All right, so it looks like that's all the questions. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you learned a lot from this session, and please let us know if you have any questions. You can email us, and we do a good job at responding as soon as possible to all your inquiries. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out the session. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.